There is a video going around right now with over 55,000 views in 7 days, made by a board-certified rheumatologist, and if you have Sjogren's, someone already sent it to you, or you are about to see it yourself. It is called 5 Newest Treatments to Cure Autoimmune Disease, and I watched the entire 17 minutes of it twice, because I needed to know if it was actually talking about you, or if it was talking about someone else's disease wearing your name. I want you to picture the moment that video probably landed in your feed. Maybe it was your sister who sent it, or someone in a Facebook support group, tagging you with the caption, "Have you seen this? This could be huge." Maybe your heart did that thing it does now every time a headline uses the word breakthrough near the word autoimmune, that small flicker of hope you have learned to be careful with, because you have felt that flicker before and watched it fizzle out into another supplement ad or another influencer selling a protocol with no actual data behind it. So you clicked, and for 17 minutes you listened to a real doctor talk about nanobodies and vagus nerve implants and lab-grown cells, and somewhere around minute 12 you probably started wondering, quietly, is any of this actually about me, or am I just watching someone else's good news happen to someone else's disease? Before I tell you what I found, I want to say something plainly, because this channel does not do what most channels do. Dr. Diana Girnita is not selling you a supplement stack. She is not showing you a before and after with a filter on it. She read the actual trials. She named the actual journals. She told her viewers the truth about cost, the truth about what is approved and what is not, and the truth about the ear clip vagus devices being sold online with zero evidence behind them. That kind of honesty is rare in this space, and if you have ever been burned by an influencer who promised you a cure in a bottle, you already know how rare it is. So credit where it is due. She did good work, and in a landscape absolutely flooded with people who have zero medical training telling you to cut out nightshades and you will be cured in 90 days, having a board-certified rheumatologist willing to sit in front of a camera and say plainly, "This is not FDA approved, this costs close to $1 million, this is not for everyone," that kind of restraint deserves to be acknowledged out loud, not just quietly appreciated and moved past. I also want to give her credit for one more thing worth flagging. She specifically warned her viewers about the ear clip vagus nerve devices being sold online right now, and told them plainly that the actual clinical evidence only supports the implantable device studied in that trial, not the cheap gadget with a testimonial attached to it. If you have ever seen one of those ear clips pop up in your feed, now you know exactly why to skip it. But here is the thing nobody is going to tell you, and it is the reason I am making this video today. Out of the 5 breakthroughs she covered, 4 of them were built, tested, and designed for rheumatoid arthritis. Not Sjogren's. Rah. The nanobody drug, the vagus nerve implant, the synovial biopsy for precision medicine, all 3 of those are joint disease science. Your disease does not live primarily in your joints. It lives in your glands, your tear ducts, your salivary glands, your nerves, sometimes your lungs, sometimes your kidneys. So when a video tells you these are the 5 biggest breakthroughs in autoimmune disease and you have Sjogren's, you are left standing there wondering which one of these is actually for me. Let me walk you through why the other 4 do not transfer over, quickly, so you are not left wondering later. The nanobody drug she opened with, ozoralizumab, targets TNF-alpha, the same inflammatory molecule biologics like HUMIIA have targeted for 30 years, and it was studied and approved in Japan specifically for rheumatoid arthritis, seronegative spondyloarthritis, and psoriatic arthritis, joint diseases, not glandular ones. The vagus nerve stimulator she described in detail, the implantable device from the RESET-RA trial published in Nature Medicine, was tested exclusively in patients with moderate to severe rheumatoid arthritis who had failed biologics, again a joint disease trial, with 0 Sjogren's patients included in that specific study. And the precision medicine piece, the synovial biopsy that reads joint tissue at the molecular level to sort rheumatoid arthritis into 3 distinct subtypes, is by definition a joint tissue technology. It requires inflamed synovium to biopsy in the first place, tissue that primary Sjogren's, without overlapping RA, typically does not have inflamed in the same way. None of that makes her video dishonest, it was simply built around the title she chose, autoimmune disease broadly, with rheumatoid arthritis carrying most of the actual weight underneath that broad title. That is an extremely common pattern in this space, and it is exactly why I think it matters to have someone translate general autoimmune content into what specifically applies to Sjogren's, because otherwise you are left doing that translation work yourself, exhausted, at midnight, Googling "Does this apply to me?" alone. The honest answer is only one. CAR T-cell therapy. That is the only piece of her video that speaks directly to what is happening inside your body, and I am going to explain exactly why in a minute. But first I want to do something her video did not do, because it was not built for this audience. I am going to give you 5 real breakthroughs that Sjogren's disease specifically has had since 2023, with the actual years attached, so you are not left guessing what applies to you and what does not. And I want to pause here for a second, because I know some of you watching this have felt this exact confusion before, not just with her video, but with almost everything you read about autoimmune disease. You see a headline that says breakthrough in autoimmune treatment, your heart jumps a little, you click, you watch, and by the end you realize it was talking about rheumatoid arthritis the whole time, or lupus, or psoriasis, and Sjogren's got a single sentence buried somewhere in the middle, if it got mentioned at all. That happens because Sjogren's is still treated by most of the research world as the quiet cousin of lupus, the disease that gets studied in the shadow of other diseases instead of on its own terms. So when something is actually built for you, specifically, by name, in a published trial, I think you deserve to know about it clearly, not buried under 4 other conditions. Let's start with why CAR T matters to you specifically, because you need to understand the mechanism before the rest of this makes sense. Your immune system has cells called B cells, and their normal job is to make antibodies that protect you from real threats, viruses, bacteria, things that do not belong. But in Sjogren's, a portion of your B cells go rogue. They start manufacturing antibodies against your own glandular tissue, your own salivary glands, your own tear ducts, sometimes your own nerve fibers. That is the mechanism behind the dryness that never goes away no matter how much water you drink, the fatigue that sleep does not touch, and for some of you, the burning nerve pain that no one can explain on a scan. The drugs you have probably already tried, things like rituximab, work by clearing those B cells out of your bloodstream. But here is the problem your rheumatologist may not have fully explained to you. Rituximab can only reach the B cells that are circulating in your blood. It cannot reach the B cells that have set up permanent residence inside your salivary glands, inside your lymph nodes, inside the tissue itself. Those hidden B cells sit there, protected, and they keep producing the exact antibodies that are destroying your glandular function, even while your blood tests look better. CAR T-cell therapy is different, because it does not just clear your blood, it sends re-engineered T-cells, your own immune soldiers, fitted with a targeting receptor, into every tissue compartment in your body, including the ones rituximab could never touch. In the trial Dr. Girnita referenced, called the Castle trial, published in Nature earlier this year, 9 out of 9 patients with a related autoimmune disease reached complete remission for 2 years after a single infusion. No steroids. No ongoing immunosuppressive drugs. One treatment. Think about what a sentence like that actually represents. If you have spent years cycling through drug after drug, each one working for a while and then quietly losing its effect, each new prescription coming with its own list of side effects, its own blood work schedule, its own moment of hope followed eventually by disappointment. The idea of one infusion, one time, followed by years of remission without daily medication, is not just a better drug, it is a completely different category of treatment. It is not asking your immune system to be managed forever, it is asking your immune system to be reset, the bad B cell clones cleared out entirely, and when new B cells regrow months later, they come back naive, without the memory of attacking your own glands baked into them. Now I want to be honest with you the same way she was honest with her audience, because that matters more to me than views. This is not FDA approved for Sjogren's. It is not sitting in your rheumatologist's office as an option you can walk in and ask for tomorrow. It is expensive, it can run close to $1 million outside of a clinical trial, and the long-term data on autoimmune disease specifically is still young. But if you have severe, refractory Sjogren's, if you have failed multiple therapies and you are exhausted from trying, this is worth a conversation with your specialist, and it is worth looking up on clinicaltrials.gov, because trials are actively recruiting. And I know some of you are sitting there right now thinking about your own timeline. Maybe it started with a dry mouth you blamed on your air conditioning. Then it was your eyes, gritty in the morning, like there was sand under your lids that never fully went away. Then it was the fatigue, not tired like after a long day, but tired in a way that sleep does not touch, the kind where you wake up already counting down until you can lie back down again. Then maybe it moved into your joints, or your nerves started doing things doctors could not explain on a scan, burning, tingling, pain that moved around like it had a mind of its own. That progression, gland to fatigue to systemic, is exactly the pathway CAR-T is designed to interrupt at the source, not just manage symptom by symptom as they show up. That is the one piece of her video that was actually built for you. Now let me give you the 5 that were. Breakthrough number 1. Dazodalibep. 2023 into 2024. This one matters because it targets something almost nothing else does, a signal called CD40 ligand, which is essentially the handshake between your T cells and your B cells that tells your B cells to keep attacking. Block that handshake, and you interrupt the conversation between the two cell types that are driving your disease forward. Amgen presented the primary phase 2 data at a major rheumatology conference in late 2023, and then in 2024, the full peer-reviewed study was published in Nature Medicine, one of the most respected journals in medicine. What made researchers pay attention was not just that patients felt better, it was that this drug showed benefit even in patients whose glands had almost no measurable saliva or tear production left, patients who are usually told there is nothing left to protect because the damage is already done. Dazodalibep is now moving into phase 3 trials, which is the stage right before a drug can be submitted for approval. If you are the person who has been told your glands are already too damaged for treatment to matter, I want you to hear that sentence again. Even in patients with almost no measurable function left, there was benefit. Write that down. Bring it to your next appointment. Think about what that actually means for daily life, not just for a lab value on a chart. It means the difference between choking on dry food at dinner with your family, and actually being able to sit through a meal without water in one hand the entire time. It means the difference between waking up at 3 in the morning because your eyes feel like they are glued shut, and getting through a full night without reaching for eye drops in the dark. Dazodalibep is not approved yet, and I am not going to pretend it is sitting on a pharmacy shelf waiting for you, but the mechanism itself, interrupting the handshake between T cells and B cells before the attack even starts, is a genuinely different approach than anything that came before it, and that is worth understanding even before it reaches your rheumatologist's office. Breakthrough number 2. Nipocalimab. 2024 into 2025. This drug works on a completely different part of the immune system, something called the neonatal Fc receptor, or Fc-ion for short. Think of Fc-ion as a recycling system inside your body that protects antibodies from being broken down and cleared out, which normally is a good thing. It is how your body holds onto protective antibodies for months at a time. But in Sjogren's, that same recycling system is protecting the harmful autoantibodies too, the ones attacking your glands. Nipocalimab blocks that recycling process, so the harmful antibodies get cleared out faster instead of being preserved and recirculated. In November 2024, the FDA granted it breakthrough therapy designation specifically for moderate to severe Sjogren's disease, after strong phase 2 results. That designation exists to fast-track exactly the kind of drug that shows real promise and real urgency. Then in March 2025, it received an additional fast-track designation, which again speeds up the regulatory review process. It is currently being evaluated in phase 3 trials right now. What I want you to notice here is the timeline itself. Breakthrough therapy designation in November 2024, fast-track in March 2025, that is momentum. That is not a drug quietly sitting in a lab, that is a drug the FDA itself has flagged as moving with urgency, specifically for your disease, by name. I want to explain why that recycling mechanism matters so much, because it is honestly one of the more elegant pieces of biology in this entire list. Your body was never designed with an off switch for its own antibody recycling process. It assumes every antibody it is protecting is one that is helping you. Sjogren's exploits that blind trust. The harmful antibodies get treated exactly the same as the protective ones, shielded, recirculated, kept alive far longer than they should be. Nipocalimab does not try to fight your B cells directly, it goes after the recycling system itself and tells it to stop protecting the antibodies that are hurting you specifically. That is a fundamentally different kind of intervention than anything on Dr. Girnita's list, because it is not blocking inflammation after the fact, it is shortening the lifespan of the exact molecules doing the damage. Breakthrough number 3. Deucravacitinib. 2024 into 2026. This one is a little different from the others, because it is not brand new, it is already commercially available and already FDA approved, just for a different condition, plaque psoriasis. What is happening now is that researchers took a drug already proven safe in real patients and asked whether it could help with Sjogren specifically, through a large international phase 3 trial called POITYK SJS1. That trial began actively recruiting patients in 2024, and closed recruitment in early 2026, which means we are now in the window where results will start to emerge. This drug works by blocking an enzyme called TYK2, which sits inside a signaling pathway that multiple inflammatory diseases rely on, including the pathway believed to drive a lot of the systemic inflammation in Sjogren's, not just the dryness, but the fatigue, the joint pain, and in some patients, the skin involvement. The reason this one is worth watching closely is because it is not starting from zero. It already has years of real-world safety data in other patients, which means if the Sjogren's trial results come back positive, the path to approval could move faster than a drug starting completely from scratch. If you have ever felt like your fatigue and your joint pain and your dry mouth were three separate battles being fought on three separate fronts, this is the drug built for the idea that they are not separate at all, that they are three symptoms of the exact same overactive pathway running underneath all of it. That is a different kind of promise than symptom management. That is a promise of addressing the root signal instead of chasing each downstream effect one at a time. Now, before I go further, I want to check in with you, because I know this is a lot of information, and it can start to blur together if you are not the type who reads clinical trial data for fun, which, let's be honest, is almost nobody. If you are still with me, if you are recognizing your own body somewhere in what I have described so far, drop the word symptom map in the comments right now, and I will personally send you a link to get a copy of the Sjogren symptom map, so you have somewhere to actually track which of these breakthroughs apply to your specific pattern of symptoms as they move through trials. This is not something I want you to just watch and forget by tomorrow. Breakthrough number 4. Telitacicept. 2025. This drug was actually approved in China back in 2021, for lupus, but its major breakthrough moment for Sjogren specifically came in October 2025, when researchers released successful 48-week Phase 3 clinical trial data at the American College of Rheumatology Convergence, one of the largest rheumatology conferences in the world. Telitacicept works by blocking two separate signals at once, BLIS and APRIL, both of which are essentially fuel sources that keep your rogue B cells alive and producing antibodies. Cut both fuel sources at the same time, and you are hitting the problem from two directions instead of one. 48 weeks of data is not a short snapshot, that is nearly a full year of tracking real patients, and the results were strong enough to be presented on one of the biggest stages in the field. What makes this one worth paying attention to is that it already has years of use in actual patients overseas, for a related autoimmune disease, which means there is already a real-world safety track record behind it, not just a lab number. There is something worth sitting with here too, because telitacicept is one of the few drugs on this list that did not start its life as a Sjogren's drug at all. It started as a lupus drug, and the researchers who study it noticed the underlying biology overlapped closely enough with Sjogren's to be worth testing directly. That is actually how a lot of real progress happens in this field, quietly, sideways, one disease borrowing insight from another, rather than a single dramatic headline moment. 48 weeks is long enough to see whether an effect is real or whether it fades after the first few months the way so many treatments do, and this one held. Breakthrough number 5. Ianalumab. 2025 into 2026. This is the most recent development on this list, and in some ways the most significant, because of how fast it moved. Ianalumab targets a receptor called BAFF receptor, which sits directly on the surface of your B cells and acts like a survival switch. If you block that switch, those rogue B cells cannot survive as long as they normally would. In 2025, this drug achieved what researchers described as historically successful Phase 3 trial results, meaning the highest stage of testing before a drug reaches the market. That success was significant enough that in January 2026, the FDA granted it breakthrough therapy designation, and global regulatory applications are now underway, which is the formal process of asking health authorities around the world to approve it for real patients. I want you to sit with that phrase for a second, historically successful Phase 3 results. In an area of medicine where progress has felt painfully slow for decades, where so many of you have been told for years that there simply is nothing new, that phrase does not get used lightly. Blocking the BAFF receptor directly on the surface of the B cell is a more targeted move than most of what came before it. Older approaches flood the whole system and hope the B cells get caught in the crossfire along with everything else. This one goes straight to the survival switch on the cell that is causing the problem in the first place. And the speed of the regulatory response tells its own story. It normally takes years for a drug to move from Phase 3 completion to a formal breakthrough designation, and this one moved in a matter of months. That kind of speed usually only happens when the data is unambiguous. Before I close this out, I want to answer a question I know some of you are already forming in your head, which is why now? Why did 5 separate breakthroughs suddenly cluster into this same 3-year window, 2023 through 2026, after decades where Sjogren's research moved at a crawl? The honest answer has less to do with a single genius discovery and more to do with something structural. For years, Sjogren's was studied almost entirely as a side effect of studying lupus, borrowed trial designs, borrowed drug candidates, borrowed attention. Somewhere around 2022 and 2023, that started to shift, partly because patient advocacy groups pushed harder for Sjogren-specific trial funding, partly because researchers finally had enough biomarker data to design trials that could actually detect improvement in glandular function instead of relying on vague symptom questionnaires alone, and partly because the broader autoimmune research world, chasing lupus and IA breakthroughs, ended up building tools and mechanisms that turned out to translate directly into Sjogren's biology once someone bothered to test them there. Dazodalibep is a good example of exactly that, a CD40 ligand blocker that had been circling other autoimmune diseases for years before someone ran the Sjogren-specific trial and found some of the strongest data of the entire class. That matters because it tells you this is not a fluke, and it is not a temporary spike in interest that will fade next year. The infrastructure behind these trials, the biomarker science, the regulatory pathways, the researcher attention, all of that is now built and running, which means the pace you have seen since 2023 is far more likely to continue than to stop. I also want to address something directly, because I think you deserve the same honesty Dr. Girnita gave her audience. None of these 5 drugs are approved yet. Every single one of them is still in the trial and regulatory pipeline, which means the timeline from here to your local pharmacy could still be a year, 2 years, in some cases longer, and there is always a chance a phase 3 result disappoints where a phase 2 result looked promising. That has happened before in this exact field and it will happen again. I am not telling you any of this to get you to stop asking your doctor about approved options that exist today. I am telling you this so that when your rheumatologist mentions one of these 5 names, or when you see it come up on a patient forum, you already understand what stage it is at, what it targets, and what timeline is realistic, instead of hearing a name with no context attached to it. So here is where that leaves us. Out of everything covered in that 55,000 view video, one therapy actually speaks to Sjogren's, and it is not approved yet, and it is not simple, and it is not cheap. But underneath that video, quietly, without 55,000 views, without a viral thumbnail, 5 real breakthroughs have been happening specifically for your disease since 2023, moving through the exact regulatory milestones that matter, breakthrough therapy designations, fast-track status, phase 3 data, published peer-reviewed journals. This is not hype. This is the actual paper trail. If you are the person who has been told there is nothing new for Sjogren's, I want you to understand something. That was true for a long time. It is not true anymore. Something shifted starting in 2023, and it has not slowed down since. Let me lay the 5 out one more time, quickly, in order, so you have the full timeline in your head as one continuous story instead of 5 separate facts. 2023, Dazodalibep presents its first strong data. 2024, that same drug gets published in Nature Medicine, and in the same year nipocalimab receives breakthrough therapy designation in November. 2025, nipocalimab adds fast-track status in March, telitacicept presents its 48-week phase 3 data in October, and ianalumab posts historically successful phase 3 results. Then in January of 2026, ianalumab receives its own breakthrough therapy designation, while deucravacitinib closes recruitment on its large-scale international trial in early 2026 as well. Read that back and it is not 5 isolated headlines, it is one continuous 3-year acceleration, each year building directly on momentum from the year before it. Now here is what I need from you, because this only works if we do it together. If any part of this resonated with you, if you recognized yourself in the patient with almost no gland function left, or the patient who has failed drug after drug and been told to just manage it, comment the word map below, and I will send you the Sjogren's Ultimate Symptom Map and Diagnostic Action Plan, completely free. It walks through the full diagnostic pathway for Sjogren's, lupus, and IA side by side, so you can finally see where your symptoms actually fit, instead of guessing in 12-minute appointments that never feel like enough time. Because here is the truth: none of these breakthroughs fix on their own. Even the best drug in the world does not help you if you never got the right diagnosis in the first place, if you are still stuck in what I call the sicker gap, that space between your first dry eye complaint and the day someone finally connects the dots and says the word Sjogren's out loud. Some of you have been living in that gap for 5 years. Some of you for 10. And every single one of these breakthroughs I just described only matters once you are on the other side of that gap, once you actually have the diagnosis in hand. So before you close this video, ask yourself honestly, do you have a name for what is happening in your body, or are you still collecting symptoms one by one, hoping someone eventually adds them up for you? I hear from people in this community every single week who tell me some version of the same story. They saw an eye doctor for the dryness, and got artificial tears. They saw a dentist for the cavities that kept coming back no matter how well they brushed, and got a referral to a specialist they never followed up with. They saw their primary doctor for the fatigue, and got told to sleep more and manage their stress. 3 different doctors, 3 different specialties, 3 separate notes in 3 separate charts, and not one of them was in the room with the other 2 to notice that dry eyes plus dry mouth plus unrelenting fatigue is not 3 unrelated problems, it is one disease presenting through 3 different doors. That is the sicker gap. It is not a failure on your part for not connecting the dots sooner, it is a failure of a healthcare system that specializes people into silos and rarely asks anyone to step back and look at the whole picture at once. And the reason I keep coming back to this, video after video, is because I have watched what happens on both sides of that gap. On one side, someone spends years bouncing between specialists, trying supplement after supplement, being told their blood work looks fine so it must be stress, slowly starting to believe maybe it really is all in their head. On the other side of that same gap, someone gets a name, gets a rheumatologist who actually treats Sjogren's as a real systemic disease and not just dry eyes with an inconvenient name, and suddenly every single piece of information I just gave you today, every drug, every trial, every mechanism, becomes something they can actually use, because they know which battle they are fighting. If it is the second one, if you are still in that gap, comment the word map below right now, and I will personally send you the Sjogren's Ultimate Symptom Map and Diagnostic Action Plan. It lays out the full diagnostic pathway for Sjogren's side by side with the pathways for lupus and rheumatoid arthritis, because so many of you are sitting in overlapping symptoms and nobody has ever shown you where they diverge. This is not a paid product, it is not behind some funnel designed to sell you 12 upsells, it is the resource I wish someone had put directly into my hands the first time I ever heard the word Sjogren's used about my own body instead of someone else's chart. I also want to say this plainly before we end, because I think it needs to be said out loud more often in this space. You are allowed to be hopeful about breakthroughs like CAR-T and ianalumab and dazodalibep, and you are also allowed to be exhausted by how long all of this is taking. Both of those things can be true in the same body at the same time. Hope does not require you to pretend the weight does not hurt, and exhaustion does not mean you have given up. Sit with both. Let them coexist. And in the meantime, arm yourself with the actual paper trail, the actual years, the actual mechanisms, so that when one of these 5 drugs finally does cross the finish line, you are not hearing the name for the first time in a rushed 12-minute appointment, you already know exactly what it does and exactly why it might matter for you. I think about this a lot, actually, the gap between what is happening in a research lab right now and what actually reaches a patient sitting across from their rheumatologist 2 years from now. That gap is where most of you live, caught between hope and waiting. And the only thing that has ever made that gap feel smaller for me is information, real information, with real years attached to it, not vague reassurance that things are improving somewhere out there. You deserve to walk into every single appointment as the most informed person in the room about your own disease, not because your doctor is failing you, most are doing their genuine best inside a system that gives them 12 minutes and expects miracles, but because nobody, not even the best rheumatologist alive, can track every single trial across every single autoimmune disease in real time while also seeing 40 patients a week. That tracking, that translating, is what I am here for. I will keep tracking every one of these 5 drugs as new data comes out, because you deserve to know what is actually happening in the research, not just what gets the most views, and not just what gets 55,000 views in 7 days because it used the word cure in the title. Real progress in this disease rarely looks that dramatic from the outside. It looks like a breakthrough therapy designation buried in a press release, a phase 3 trial quietly closing recruitment, a journal article most patients will never see unless someone like me reads it and brings it back to you in plain language. Stay with me, keep asking questions in your appointments, Keep pushing for the specialist who takes the whole picture seriously instead of just the one symptom in front of them, and I will see you in the next one.